Sign the check. Or we call 911. My mother didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She said it calmly, like she was asking me to pass the salt. I stared at the paper in front of me. $438,000. The numbers didn't feel real. They didn't feel like mine. They felt like they belonged to someone older, smarter, more established. But my name was printed right there at the bottom. And that's why my parents were sitting across from me in my own apartment, demanding I do the right thing. By right thing, they meant handing it over. All of it. My name is Emily Harper. I'm 27 years old. And the night my parents tried to take nearly $500,000 from me was the night I realized I had never really known them at all. But to understand how we got here, I need to go back 3 weeks. 3 weeks before they threatened to call the police on their own daughter. 3 weeks before I set the trap. It started with a phone call. Miss Harper, this is Reynolds and Grant Legal Associates. We've been trying to reach you regarding an inheritance. I almost hung up. Inheritance? That sounded like a scam. I think you have the wrong person, I said. We're calling regarding your grandfather, Thomas Harper. That made me freeze. My grandfather died 11 years ago. He was the only person in my family who ever made me feel seen. He used to take me to job sites when I was little. He co-owned a mid-sized construction company in Ohio. Nothing flashy, but steady, solid. After he passed, my parents handled everything. I was 16. I trusted them. I never asked questions. Apparently, I should have. 2 days later, I was sitting in a polished conference room across from James Reynolds, my grandfather's former business partner. He slid a folder toward me. Your grandfather retained a 12% silent equity share in the company. That share was placed into a trust under your name. My heart started pounding. A trust? For me. He nodded. It was structured to be released on your 27th birthday. I turned 27 3 weeks ago. He opened another page. The company expanded significantly over the last decade. Your equity portion, after tax obligations, comes to $438,000. I didn't breathe. $438,000. I laughed, but it wasn't happy. It was shock. There must be a mistake. There isn't, he said gently. Your parents were notified of the trust when it was created. That was the first crack in the glass. They knew. For 11 years, they knew, and never told me. I left the office in a daze. I sat in my car and cried. Not because of the money, because my grandfather had believed in me. He always used to say, Emmy, one day you're going to need a door out. I'll make sure you have one. I never understood what he meant. Now I did. I decided to tell my parents that weekend. I still believed, stupidly, that they would be happy for me. When I walked into their house and told them about the inheritance, my mom smiled at first. But when I said the number, her smile disappeared. How much? My dad asked. $438,000. He went quiet. Then he leaned back in his chair and said, Well, that solves our problem. I blinked. What problem? My mother sighed dramatically. You know we've been struggling. The mortgage, credit cards, your father's business downer. I did know they struggled, but I also knew my dad bought a brand new truck last year. And my mom took 2 self-care retreats to Scottsdale. Of course I'll help, I said carefully. But I need to think. I want to invest some of it. Pay off my own student loans first. Silence. Then my father laughed. Invest? Emily, don't be ridiculous. This money belongs to the family. My stomach dropped. It was left to me. It was left because of us. My mother snapped. We're his children. You're just the beneficiary.
Just
the beneficiary.
I felt something shift inside me.
I'm not transferring anything right now, I said. That's when the warmth disappeared. The next morning, I received a spreadsheet from my mom. Total family debt, $312,000. Underneath it, we expect the transfer by Friday. Not can you help? Not let's talk. Expect. When I didn't respond, my dad called. If you refuse, he said calmly, we'll speak to an attorney. I almost laughed. On what grounds? We can contest the trust, he said. We can argue your grandfather wasn't fully competent, or that you were manipulated. Manipulated? They were willing to attack my grandfather's memory to get the money. That was the moment something inside me hardened. They didn't see me as their daughter. They saw a payout. So I stopped arguing. I stopped defending myself. And I started planning. I called Mr. Reynolds back. Then I hired my own attorney. And that's when I learned something my parents clearly didn't know. My grandfather had included a protection clause. If any beneficiary was pressured, coerced, or threatened into surrendering the trust assets, the funds would immediately freeze. And any party attempting coercion could face legal consequences. My grandfather knew. He knew exactly who his son and daughter-in-law were. He just never said it out loud.
So I called my parents.
Okay, I said quietly. You're right.
I'll sign.
Come to my apartment Friday night. My mom sounded satisfied. We knew you'd come to your senses. Friday night, they arrived at 7:12 p.m. My dad brought printed transfer forms. My mom brought a pen. They sat at my dining table like they were closing a business deal. In a way, they were, "Sign the check," my mom said. Or we call 911 and report financial exploitation. Financial exploitation.
By me.
I looked at the number one last time. $438,000. Then I pressed a button on my phone. The bedroom door behind them opened, and my attorney stepped out. Please, he said calmly, placing a folder on the table. Continue. Everything from the last 15 minutes has been recorded. The color drained from my mother's face. My father stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. You set us up? I looked at him. No, I said quietly. You walked into it. And that was just the beginning. My father's face turned a shade I had never seen before. Not anger, not embarrassment.
Fear.
You're recording us, he said. My attorney, Mr. Collins, didn't flinch.
Yes.
With the consent of the property owner. Emily invited you here. You made verbal threats involving false police reports and financial coercion. My mother stood up slowly. This is ridiculous, she said. We're her parents. Mr. Collins nodded. And she is an adult beneficiary of a legally protected trust. The room felt smaller, tighter. For a second, I almost folded, almost said forget it, almost apologized. Because that's what I'd been trained to do my whole life. Smooth it over.
Keep the peace.
Don't upset Mom. Don't challenge Dad. But then I remembered something. When I was 19, I got a small academic grant, $3,000. I was so proud. It was the first money I had ever earned on my own. My dad asked to borrow it for a month. I never saw it again. When I was 23, my mom convinced me to co-sign a credit card, just temporarily. It defaulted. My credit score dropped 90 points. And they told me I was being dramatic. This wasn't about one check. This was a pattern. And tonight, I was done being the family safety net. You threatened to call the police on me, I said quietly. My father scoffed. You're blowing this out of proportion. No, I replied. You are. My attorney opened the folder and slid a document across the table. This, he said, is the clause your father-in-law included in the trust agreement. My mother stiffened. If coercion, intimidation, or illegal threats are used to compel asset transfer, Mr. Collins read, the trust is to be frozen and referred to corporate counsel for investigation. My father's eyes flicked to me. You wouldn't. I held his gaze. I already did. Silence. Heavy, crushing silence. Mr. Collins continued. Additionally, any attempt to file false claims of financial exploitation may result in civil penalties. My mom sat back down slowly. For the first time in my life, she looked unsure. You're really choosing money over family? She asked. And there it was. The script, the guilt, the manipulation. But something inside me didn't bend this time. No, I said. You did. That's when my father's voice changed. The softness disappeared. You think you're better than us now? He snapped. You think you earned that money? No, I said honestly. I didn't earn it. Grandpa chose me. Wrong thing to say. My father slammed his palm on the table. He chose you to spite me. The words hung in the air. And suddenly something clicked.
Spite.
This wasn't just about debt. This was about pride. About ego. About something that happened long before I even understood what money was. Dad, I said carefully, what happened between you and Grandpa? My mother shot him a warning look, but he was already unraveling. He never thought I was good enough, my father muttered. Not for the business. Not for anything. Always criticizing. Always comparing. That's not true, my mom said sharply. But he ignored her. He said I lacked discipline, vision, that I made reckless decisions. My mind flashed to the truck, the failed investments, the credit cards. Oh my God, I whispered. Grandpa hadn't disinherited him randomly. He didn't trust him with money, and he made sure I'd be protected from him. You think this makes you special? My father continued. You're just his little revenge. That hurt more than I expected. For a split second, doubt crept in. Was I just a pawn in some old family feud? But then I remembered the way Grandpa used to sit with me at the kitchen table, teaching me how to balance a ledger, how to calculate profit margins. He never did that with Dad. He once told me quietly, responsibility skips generations sometimes. At the time, I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. Mr. Collins stood up. I think this conversation is over. My parents looked at me one last time. My mother's eyes were glossy, but I couldn't tell if it was real emotion or strategy. If you walk away from us over this, she said softly, don't expect us to be here when you come back. There it was, the threat of abandonment, the nuclear option. Except, I suddenly realized something. They had already emotionally abandoned me years ago. When they used my credit, when they borrowed money without returning it, when they kept the trust secret for over a decade. They left first. I'm not walking away, I said. I'm just not paying your debts. My father grabbed the papers off the table. This isn't over. And then they left. The door closed, and the silence afterward was deafening. My knees gave out the second they were gone. I slid down against the kitchen cabinets and started shaking. Mr. Collins crouched beside me. You did the right thing, he said gently. Did I? Because it didn't feel victorious. It felt like grief, like I had just buried something. After he left, I sat alone in my apartment for hours. I kept expecting my phone to buzz. An apology, a message, anything. Instead, at 11:47 p.m., my cousin Rachel texted me. What did you do to your parents? My stomach dropped. They're saying you manipulated Grandpa and stole the inheritance. I stared at the screen.
Stole.
Within hours, the story had flipped. I wasn't the daughter who refused to be extorted. I was the greedy granddaughter who betrayed her own parents. And that's when I understood something chilling. They weren't done. They were going to turn the entire family against me. And if I didn't act carefully, I could lose more than just money. I could lose everyone. But what they didn't know was this. I still had one more card to play. One my grandfather left for me. One they never saw coming. And it wasn't about money. It was about truth. By Saturday morning, the damage was already spreading. 3 missed calls from Aunt Linda. 2 from my older cousin Mark. A Facebook notification that made my stomach twist. My mother had posted a vague, dramatic status. Some children forget who raised them when money enters the picture. Heartbroken beyond words. No names. No details. Just enough. The comments flooded in. Stay strong. Money changes people. So sad how ungrateful kids can be. I felt physically sick. They were building a narrative. And I was the villain. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't defend myself. Because Grandpa had taught me something else. When people rush to tell their version first, it's usually because they know the facts won't favor them. Instead, I opened the envelope Mr. Reynolds had given me the day before. There had been a second sealed packet inside the trust documents. He told me to open it only if there was family resistance. I hadn't understood what that meant at the time. Now I did. Inside was a handwritten letter. Grandpa's handwriting was slightly shaky, but unmistakable. Emily, if you're reading this, it means things went the way I feared they might. My chest tightened. I love your father, but love and trust are not always the same thing. I had to pause. I gave him chances in business. Many. Each time, decisions were made out of pride, not planning. Out of emotion, not discipline. I learned the hard way that money in the wrong hands doesn't solve problems. It multiplies them. Tears blurred the page. You are different. You ask questions. You listen. You think before you leap. That is why this trust is yours. Not revenge, not spite, belief. But then I reached the part that changed everything. There is one more matter you must know. In 2014, your father attempted to access this trust early. He claimed you were financially unstable and requested control as your guardian advisor. I refused. My breath caught. He tried to access it. Without telling me, he insisted he was protecting you. I saw it differently. I sat there, stunned. This wasn't sudden desperation. This was planned interest. Long-term interest. My entire body felt cold. At the bottom of the letter, Grandpa had added something else. I have attached copies of correspondence should you ever need clarity. Behind the letter were printed emails, legal requests,
Pushback from Grandpa.
firm refusals, and one line from my father that made my hands shake. If she never knows about it, she won't miss it. I dropped the papers. For years, I thought they were just financially irresponsible. But this was intentional concealment. They never planned to tell me. Not at 27. Not ever. Unless they controlled it first. Suddenly the threats, the pressure, the urgency, it all made sense. They weren't reacting emotionally. They were reacting to losing access. And that's when I understood the real trap. If they successfully painted me as unstable or greedy, it could impact my professional reputation. I work in nonprofit finance. Integrity is everything. If rumors spread that I manipulated my elderly grandfather, that could follow me. This wasn't just family drama. This was character assassination. I called Mr. Collins immediately. We need to prepare, I said.
For what? He asked.
For escalation. By Sunday afternoon, it came. My father emailed me. Subject line. Final notice. If you do not reconsider your position, we will pursue legal review of the trust's validity and make certain the family understands the full picture. Translation. Surrender or we burn everything. For a moment, fear crept in. What if they actually filed something? Even if it failed, the stress, the cost, the public record. But then I remembered something else. Grandpa didn't just leave money. He left structure. I called Mr. Reynolds. There was a long pause when I told him about the Facebook posts. Then he sighed. I was hoping it wouldn't come to this. To what? I asked. There's a board meeting Tuesday. The construction company had grown. It wasn't just Grandpa's small operation anymore. It had investors, a board of directors, and apparently, they were aware of my father's past attempts to interfere. Your equity isn't silent anymore, Mr. Reynolds said carefully. At this valuation level, you technically qualify for advisory voting rights. I blinked. What does that mean? It means if your father tries to publicly challenge the trust, the board will defend it. Aggressively. Because protecting the trust meant protecting the company's legal stability. My father wasn't just threatening me. He was threatening a corporation. And corporations do not respond emotionally. They respond strategically. Tuesday came quickly. I wasn't physically present, but I was on video call. When Mr. Reynolds addressed the board, he laid everything out. The threats, the coercion, the social media insinuations. The prior attempt in 2014. One of the board members, an older woman named Patricia, leaned toward the camera. Is the beneficiary requesting formal defense? She asked. My voice shook slightly. Yes. Then it will be handled.
3 words. Cold.
Professional. Final. By Wednesday morning, my father received a certified letter from corporate counsel. Cease and desist. Any further attempts to interfere with the trust would result in legal counteraction. And just like that, the power dynamic shifted. For the first time, my parents weren't dealing with me. They were dealing with something bigger. Something they couldn't intimidate. The phone rang an hour later.
Dad.
I let it go to voicemail. His message was different this time. Less confident. You went too far, he said. You brought outsiders into this. Outsiders. As if they hadn't threatened police. As if they hadn't tried to rewrite history. For a brief second, I almost felt guilty. Almost. But then he added, "You've humiliated this family." And that's when it hit me. This was never about survival. It was about control. And control was slipping. But what none of them knew yet was that the real truth wasn't even about the money. There was something else in Grandpa's documents. Something my parents had hidden for decades. Something that explained why he protected me so fiercely. And when I uncovered it, it wouldn't just change the argument. It would change my entire identity. I didn't sleep Wednesday night. Not because I was afraid anymore. Because I felt like something bigger was sitting just beneath the surface. Grandpa's letter had answered many questions, but not all of them. There was still one sealed document in the envelope. It wasn't labeled. It wasn't mentioned directly. Just clipped behind everything else. I opened it at 2:14 a.m. And the first line knocked the air out of me. Confidential, DNA, confirmation record. My hands went numb.
No. No, no, no.
I read it once.
Twice.
3 times. The date, 1998. The result, 99.98% probability of grandparentage. Not paternity, grandparentage. I felt the room tilt. I did the math in my head. I was 5 years old. Why would Grandpa need DNA confirmation that I was his granddaughter? Unless there had been doubt. My heart started pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I flipped the page. There was a short typed note from Grandpa. For my records only, in case the truth ever needs protecting. Truth? Protecting from what? Or from who? The next morning, I drove to Mr. Reynolds' office without calling ahead. He saw my face and immediately closed his door. "You found it," he said quietly. "You knew." My voice cracked. He nodded slowly. "I suspected you would eventually. Why would Grandpa test my DNA?" There was a long silence. Then he said something that shattered the last illusion I had left. "Because your father requested it." Everything inside me froze. He thought. Mr. Reynolds hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "He thought you might not be biologically his." The air left my lungs. What? There were marital problems back then. Accusations.
Distrust.
It got ugly. I felt like I was watching someone else's life from outside my body. And your grandfather demanded a private test. He wanted proof before your father made any permanent decisions. Permanent decisions. Like walking away. Like disowning. Like something worse. And the result. I whispered. Mr. Reynolds looked directly at me. "You are his granddaughter." Relief flooded me for half a second. Then the second wave hit.
Wait.
If I'm Grandpa's biological granddaughter, that means my father is my biological father, I said. Yes. Then why the secrecy? Mr. Reynolds leaned back. Because even after the result came back, your father never fully let go of the doubt. Something cracked inside me. All those years, all those subtle comments. "You're too sensitive. You don't think like me. You must get that from your mother." The emotional distance. The constant need to prove myself. It wasn't just control. It was resentment. He had doubted me before I even knew what doubt was. And Grandpa knew. That's why he protected me. Not because I was revenge. Not because I was special. But because he knew what it felt like to be questioned in your own home. And suddenly, I understood something even deeper. The money wasn't what they were really fighting for. It was validation. If they controlled the trust, they controlled the narrative. If I stood independent, financially, legally, emotionally, then the story that I was less than fell apart. I drove straight to my parents' house. I didn't call first. My mom opened the door. Her face hardened immediately. "Are you here to apologize?" I walked past her into the living room. My dad stood up slowly. "What now?" I placed the DNA record on the table between us. Silence. My father's face drained of color. "You had Grandpa test me," I said quietly. He didn't deny it. My mom whispered, "That was years ago. You doubted I was yours." My father finally spoke. "It was complicated."
No.
It wasn't complicated. It was insecurity. It was pride. It was projection. "You've spent my entire life treating me like something you weren't sure you wanted," I said. "And now you're shocked I won't hand you $438,000? He looked at me like I had slapped him. "That's not fair." "Fair."
My voice shook.
"You tried to access my trust behind my back when I was a teenager. You hid it from me for 11 years. You threatened to call the police on me." My mom started crying. But for the first time, I didn't rush to comfort her. "I'm not your enemy," I said. "I'm your daughter." Silence filled the room. And then something unexpected happened. My father sat down. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Just deflated. "I thought if I had control of it," he said quietly, "I could fix everything." Fix what? The debt? Or the feeling that he had never measured up to his own father? "You can't fix insecurity with money," I said. And that was the most honest sentence I had ever spoken in that house. For the first time, no one argued. No one manipulated. No one threatened. It didn't end in hugs. It didn't end in forgiveness. It ended in something more real.
Space.
Boundaries. Truth. I kept the money. Not out of spite, but because it was meant for me. I paid off my student loans. I invested responsibly. And I put a portion into a foundation in Grandpa's name, supporting young women studying finance and business. Because that's what he did for me. As for my parents, we're distant, polite, careful, but different. And maybe that's healthier. Sometimes the biggest inheritance isn't money. It's clarity. It's seeing the story for what it really was, and choosing not to repeat it. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose between guilt and self-respect, between family pressure and personal boundaries, you're not alone. Thank you for listening to my confession. And if you want more real, emotional stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to Life Confessions. Because sometimes the hardest stories to tell are the ones that set us free.